Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the Document and Contract Designer Part 2. In this week's training, I've added a brand new feature, how to select between multiple tabs, dynamic tabs, on how to display your contracts or your documents. I'm also going to show you how to save, update, and add templates. It's going to be an incredible training. I want you to stick with us through the entire way. Let's get started. Alright, thanks so much for joining us today. I've got a great training, part 2 of the Document and Contract Designer. If you haven't seen part 1, no worries. I'm going to include the link down below. Part 1 was epic. We show you how to update and add items to any specific template. In this week's training, we're going to finish it up. We're going to add how to save, update, and delete templates, and I'm going to show you this amazing tab feature, how you can select just a few tabs to show your documents on just a few lines of code. It's going to be fantastic. I'm going to show you how to create this regardless of the type of application. You're going to be able to create these types of tabs, save any documents, save the location. So make sure you stick with us for the entire training. I do really appreciate you sticking with us. I bring these to you each and every Tuesday, each and every a brand new training. If you like these, I just ask for you a few things. All you need to do is click the subscription button below and make sure you click on the notifications icon. That'll ensure that you get notified when I create these trainings for you each and every week. Also, don't forget to hit that like button. That really helps the YouTube algorithms. And of course, comment below. I respond to each and every comment every week. I bring these to you free every week. The workbook download is also free using the links down in the description, whether it's email or Facebook. So there was just a small issue the last few weeks with the downloads, but don't worry, we've rectified that and now you can get your downloads. So if you had any issue before, give it a try again. It should be working. If not, always email us. We're free to help you with that. It's absolutely free. If you do like these trainings, I've got a brand new 175 workbook zip file that's on sale right now for just $66. That helps keep these trainings free. So if you appreciate that, I'm going to include the links down below. Let's get started on this week's training because I've got a lot to show you, and we're going to try to squeeze this all in about an hour. So make sure you reserve an hour for your free masterclass every Tuesday. All right, let's get started. Basically, last week we covered how to update and add items. So if you select on a specific item, you can load that item, make some changes if you like. Click on update. Also, new item we went over last week, how to update a text block, which is simply a text block. So we can add a text block here and just click add the item. It's going to add it up to, once we add the name in here, of course, name is required, and then click add item. It's going to add that item. You're able to update that and show that. If you want to delete that item, all you do is just select on a specific item or select on it here, click delete, and it's going to remove it from that. So I believe we went over that. The delete item we do need to go over. I'm not sure if we don't think we covered that last week, but we're going to focus mostly on the templates and the tabs this week because there's so much to cover. These trainings are packed. I know you do like me to create these from scratch, and sometimes I will, but if it's a comprehensive training like this with so much from scratch would be 6, 7, 8 hour training. So we can't really do that. So I'll try to do the simpler ones from scratch, and the more complex ones I'll walk you through every step of the code. Regardless, you're going to know how to do these every step of the way, any type. So let's get into it. So let's go off where we went off last week, and that was inside the developer. We're going to focus on the last week. We went over the item macros. We went to add a picture, new item, the selecting an item. And basically, when we select an item, all we do is we assign a macro to that item. When we create a new item called add or update an item, we assign a specific macro called on action, and that's called item select. So that means every single item that we add a macro to it. So notice they all have macros. I can select on each one of them, and all I really want to do is take that item, it's called item 14 or whatever item it is, and then I want to put the item ID inside here, inside this little next item ID right here in selected item ID, located here in B7 is where it's going to take on that item ID. So when I select on a specific item, any item, it's going to put it in B14 and it's going to load that item. We did that. Now that's with the item select. We went over that. All we need to do is once we assign this macro, we're going to just pull that item row extract it out of the name by taking out the word item and then putting that in B7. Once we do that, we can load that item based on whatever is B7. So B7 is going to take on that item ID once we can load it in. So B7 is what it's going to take on. All right, so to delete an item, all we need to do is hover over that specific line item here, and it's going to show up our delete icon here called delete item button. That is going to show up. How does that show up on that? We went over that briefly, but let's just take a look inside the designer here. It's called selection change. When we make a selection change D9 through E20, and we also want to make sure D contains a value, then what we're going to do is we're going to put whatever's in B7 in the target row. So that means I want to put whatever row here, I want to put that right in B7, just as we did. So there's two ways to load that, right? So basically, every single item, right, is based on item 14. Remember, that's based on the row that that item is located. Same with here. This is called item 9. It's based on row 19. So that way we have two ways that we can load an item. One, by selecting it and it's going to show up, or two, by selecting it from the list. It's a great way. So there's two different ways to do that. This way is going to show up the delete item once we have that. So I want to get that delete. So the most important thing is we place that row in B7, and then I'm going to show this little delete icon, and that of course name is delete item button. So when we do that, we can then show it up through VBA. So how do we do that? After we load the item running the macro, which we went over, we then wanted with the shapes delete item button, I want to show it up based on column F, but subtract 17 from left. When it's negative, it moves it to the left. When it's positive, it moves it to the right. So I want to show it up in this column here, column F, but I don't want it exactly in this column. I want it moved on the right side of column E. To move that over, we're going to move it over 17 pixels to the left. That's going to display it here inside the right position on column E. And that's really important because no matter how wide column E is, or the width of that column, it's going to show up on the right side. 17 pixels over from the left column F. Once it is the macro that's been assigned to that particular button, once we display it, right, we put it on the top position, display it. And of course, if we select anything else outside of that, we want to hide that. So if I select anything else, it's going to hide that. If only if I select a specific item, it's going to show up. And now, again, the macro, if I select on any individual item within the group, we can display what macro has been assigned. Remember, if it's a group, we can't see what macro is assigned unless we display, when we select on a specific item inside that group. And then we see that it's called item delete. So when we edit that and we go back to the item delete, we see that we want to update the item B7. We can't make sure that's not empty. Item row, of course, is located on B7. That's the row of the item, right? B7. We need to know that row. But then I also need to know the database row, right? What is that database row? It means that's where the items are stored. Template items, they're all stored here based on that. So we're going to get into that. So when we do that, the item delete is here and then B7. So once we have B7, I need to know the item row. What is the item row? It's based on B7. Okay. Now that I have the item row, what I want to do is I want to delete that item. Delete the actual item on here running that. So if I go there, I want to delete, let's say I want to delete this or anything like that. If I select a specific item here, I know it's item 11. So if we know the row 11, we know we'll just add the words item onto that. We know what shape to delete. So basically the shape to delete is just that. It is the word item and the row. So we know what shape. Let's pull that up here inside here. So the item row, we pull that up, and then we want to make sure that we add the word item here, add the item row here, and then delete. That's going to delete the shape. We're going to use on arrow resume next and on arrow to go to 0, just in case for some reason if it does, that shape doesn't exist, or the user deleted it manually, we want to make sure that it doesn't prevent a bug. So by wrapping an on arrow resume next and on arrow go to 0, right, it won't create a bug, just in case this shape doesn't exist on your sheet. All right, now what we want to do is I want to delete the table row. Once we delete the item, I want to go into this and I want to actually remove the associated row with that item here. So how do we do that? Well, we know the database row. How do we know the database row? Because when we load that item, that database row is going to be located right here. No, we know. So all I need to do is pull that database row from A. We already know the row is 11. So now I need to get the database row. When we load these items, and I'll show you when we load that template, that database row 26 is going to be associated with this text block item. What I mean by that, when we go into 26, we see that this header text block, this item is located right here on row 26. So if I want to delete that, I need to get that row, and I get it from A. So that's what we're going to do in the next lines of code. If A in the item row value, item row does not equal empty, then delete the item table row. Then item database row is equal to A in the item row. That's the database row where that item is located, where it's stored. Then all we need to do is just sheet for C, an item database row. I'm going to clear the contents. I want to keep everything else, but I just want to clear the contents of that. So we're going to start out with C. That means I want to keep everything else here, and that keeps everything in order, just deleting the details. So when we load that template, it won't load as long as there's a name, right? So when we load it, we're going to make sure that the name, and I'll show you this in a minute, the name isn't blank. So that way, if we delete a specific item, it's going to look just like this. No name, no information. So that helps clear it out, and it maintains the integrity of the application. So we clear the contents of that information out. It won't load that item, and then we're going to delete shapes, delete item. I want to hide that. Once we delete an item, I want to hide that shape. What do I want to hide? Just want to hide this icon right here. So hiding that, and that's it. That's all we need to do to delete an item. But how do we actually go into the templates? Now we're going to focus on the templates, right? We focused on the items. Last week we did cover everything on the items as far as adding the picture, an item new, selecting an item, loading that item, add or updating that item, we covered that, and delete item, we just covered that. Now it's reviewing. So what I want to do is I want to focus on the template macros. We're going to focus on the few macros that are located here within this module here, located template save and update. We're going to focus on template load items, which is important, and of course adding the template as well as deleting the template. So that's the macros we're going to go over now. I'm going to show you exactly everything, and then we're going to get into the tab macros. That's just a few lines of code, so we're going to get into that. Okay, so what do I want to do? The first thing what I want to do is when I add a template, I want to clear everything out. Clearing add a template, I want to know how we've made changes to current template. Do we want to save those changes? Clicking no. And so what it's going to do is going to give us a brand new template here. So what I want to do is I want to clear everything out. So let's go over that macro now. That's the add template button. So when we go inside our module called template macros and we scroll up here, we're not going to focus on the save update. I just want to focus on this one right here called template add. That's the macro that has been assigned to that button. We're going to focus primarily on sheet 2. That is our designer sheet. And we want to make sure that if C3 is true, then changes have been made. If a user makes changes to an existing, we need to know that. So I want to make sure that give the user the option to save changes for the existing. If they have changes, this C3 is going to be true if they've made changes to an existing template. So that gives them the option to save those changes or not. So as soon as we make changes, that goes true. So if C3 equals true, then changes have been made. We give the message box, changes have been made to the current template. Do you want to save those changes? VB yes. And then of course the title of that little pop-up is called changes made. If their answer is yes, then we're just going to run the macro template save and update. Otherwise, we don't have to do anything. We can just continue. The next step, we're going to clear all the associated cells for that. So B2, of course, B2 we need to clear out because B2 is our template ID. So we need to clear that out. I also want to clear out the template name and everything else here associated with that. And I want to clear out any. So we could do that. So I want to clear out the cells E3, G3, all of these cells associated with the prior template, along with A9 through E9. I want to clear out all the associated items, right? Starting with A9 all the way through E and then down. I want to clear out any items associated with that. And that's going to do that. Also, I want to F10 through G884, clear all the items in the template fields. Now, if we come across here, we also see that we have some template fields here, K, and also want to locate that. So everything must be cleared out accordingly. So once we have that, we've cleared everything out, we want to make sure that we then remove all the shapes associated with that. When we load a template, there's a lot of shapes that are associated with that. So basically what I want to do is I want to delete all these shapes, but I have to be careful. I don't want to delete all of the shapes on the sheet. I only want to delete the shapes that are associated with the template. Now we can delete these shapes because when we load the template, they get recreated. So we can do it. But the most important thing is when you want to delete a set of shapes on and you don't want to delete them individually, we can use a for next loop for that. But we want to make sure that the shapes that we want to delete have unique names, right? Because we're going to use those names. So notice that every name on this particular sheet here that is associated with a template, it has the name word item in it. We want to make sure that no other shape here has the word item in it. We're going to use that. So notice that all the shapes, this is called group 10. I didn't really add any names to these, but we want to make sure that none of them have the word item in it. That's very, very important. Notice, look at this, it's called new item. I didn't put the E in, new ITM button. And the same thing here, where with this particular group, it's called update ITM. Notice the E is missing, right? Purposely, because if it included the E, it would be deleted. So what I want to do is I want to use a for next loop for every single shape in this sheet. If the shape name contains the word item, ITEM, then delete it. So how do we do that? So that's going to delete every single item. As soon as we click add template, it's going to delete every single one associated with that. So how do we do that? Well, we do that with a for next loop. For each item shape, now we've already defined item shape as a shape here, so that's very important. Item shape must be defined as a shape. Item shape as a shape. So Excel already knows that this is a shape. So we're going to focus on for every item shapes in dot shapes, meaning with sheet 2 dot shapes. For every shape inside this shape, we want to check for something. If in string item shape, the name of that shape, if it contains the word item, meaning that it's found at least once, less does not equal 0, then item shape deleted. So it's just 3 lines of code, and that's all we need to do to delete every single shape on that sheet that contains the word item, just like that. So that's it. So then what we're going to do is all that line does is we'll delete all the items within that template. Then all of a sudden we want to just take C3 value and set it to false. That means the template change is going to go to false. There are no template changes. This is a brand new template, so we're going to set it to false. And then also, we want to run the macro called item new, which is going to clear any items out that are associated with that. So it's going to clear all the item details out of that. And then what I want to do is I want to select G3. That's going to get the user ready to put in the template name. That's it. So that's all we have to do. Well, what about saving a template? What about saving or updating a template? Saving a template would be for a new one, or updating it would be for an existing. It is the same macro that we do for both. There's just a few differences. So if I make a change in this one, I want to add a new item here. Let's say I want to add something at the bottom here, so I just click new item. It's already in the new item phase. I just click what kind of item. It might be, let's say, a global variable here. So we can then select, let's just say we already have date, so maybe we want to put something like weekday, who knows. And then we can just put in the data variable. So we're going to add this. So let's say we have this weekday, and we just click the add item, and that's going to add the weekday. I'm currently recording this on a Saturday, so we're going to add it here. So we can just put it anywhere we want here. Now what we want to do is we want to save those changes. So how do we do that? So this particular save and update, this is the one I want to work on, macro. That's going to save this brand new position. So when I go to a new template, it clears everything out. It's gone, right? And I go back to this. I want that template remembered. I want to know exactly where to save that, what shape, and rebuild the shapes on this so we can save it. So how do we do that? And it's the same thing for save. So when we add a template, if we want to add a brand new template, let's just say we'll call it last will. And then we can give it a name. We can give it a data table. Let's just say customers, and then template type wills. And then also we can add a text block. Let's just say test last will test. Okay, so let's just click and then give it a name. Let's just say header, and then click add item. It's going to add that item here, and then we can make it bold here. We go into the home. We can make it bold. We can increase the font. Let's drop this down, and I want to show you how we can save these here. Last will test. So there you go. Let's just call it test will. You can also make changes. You can make changes from here or here. If we want to make changes, we can just say test will document. And then we just click update it, and we went over that last week. So what about when we click save? If I click save, I want to make sure that that gets saved, and notice that we now have a brand new tab, so we can easily locate that. So we're going to go over that. So basically that was a new one or updated one. So how do we do both of those things inside the same macro? Well, that's what we're going to do, and go into the template save. And that's the one right up here, template, all the way up here, save or update template. So it's going to be both. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we have the required fields. There's some fields that are required on this. For example, I want to make sure that it contains a template name and perhaps a data table. So let's take a look at that. So if E5 for some reason is blank or G3 is blank, meaning the template name, we need to let the user know to please save that. So please add those template names. Template name and data table are required. So we're going to exit the sub. If the user has left either one of these blank, we need to let the user know to please fill those fields in, regardless of whether we are updating an existing one or saving a new one. We want to make sure that those get filled in. So we can do that with this. Next up, assuming that they have filled in those fields, we can set the application screen updating to false. That's going to reduce the flicker and make things a lot faster, especially when we're changing tabs or loading them in or saving them. We want to make it faster. So again, the first thing we want to do is determine, is this a new template or is this an existing template? We can use the row here. If it's an existing template, we're going to have a template ID here and we're going to have a template row here. If it's a brand new one, if we click add template, we're going to see that these are blank. So we're going to use that. So if B3 equals empty, we know it's a new template. So we can then set the template row based on the first available row in sheet 3. Sheet 3 is what our templates are located on. This is here, so our first available row in this case would be 7. So we're going to set that row. Otherwise, if it's an existing, our template row will be located right here. So when I click on an existing one, we see that our template row is located in B3. I really love this tab feature. It's very, very cool. It's very intuitive, just like if you were a PDF or something. So I really like it, and I can't wait to show it to you. Really easy to program too, so you're going to be able to do that very soon. We're going to get to that. So B2, all right, we're going to set the template ID. We want to know what the template ID is, and we notice we have the next template ID here. This is going to use the max formula. We have template IDs. This is the named range. If you want to add that, make sure that their template IDs are always numerical. So that's how we can use the max. So we know the max is, in this case, is 4 plus 1 is going to get us our next template ID. So that's just what we do here. And if for some reason there's an error, why would there be an error? Well, there would be an error if there's no templates that are saved. In this case, we want to set it to 1. The default would be 1 if there's an error. Otherwise, what we want to do is we want to know the maximum of all the template IDs plus 1. That is going to get us our next one. So basically what I want to do is two things. When I have a new template, I'm going to take this template ID, I want to place it right here inside B2, and I also want to take that same template ID and I want to place it in the first available row. In this case it would be A7. So that's only for new templates, okay? So that's what we're doing. We're focused just on the new templates. So these lines of code here, these 3 lines are only for if it's new. If it's an existing, it's going to be this line of code. So again, we're going to place that new template ID in B2. We're also going to place that template ID in A in the template row. That's going to put that template ID there. Assuming it's existing, we already know the row. The template ID would already be there. So all we need to do is just determine the template row, and that's going to be based on whatever's in B3. That's going to let us know our template row. Once we have that, we can then make the updates or add the information, template name, table, and template type. Notice I didn't use data mapping. Data mapping is something that I use quite common. There's only 3 columns, so it's kind of not needed. But if we had a lot of template information here, if we had a lot of columns, I would use data mapping, in which I loop through the fields, looping through, and then I would have usually in row 1 I'll have the map data to the specific cells here, 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 but with just a little bit of code. With just a little bit of data, I don't necessarily need the data mapping. So moving on, now that we've determined whether it is new or existing, everything else that we do beyond this point is regardless of whether it is a new template or an existing. So the first thing I want to do is add in the template name from G3 or E5 or G5. Add in all this data. These 3 lines are going to go directly into here, template name, table, and type. So that's just really simple. All we're doing is transferring the information from here, here, and here, and just bringing it over into these 3. That's it for the document template. There's not a lot of main data. Everything else inside that macro, we're going to focus on the template items, getting all this information inside. And all that information, we want to know everything about each item. So we need to loop through all the items inside this template and making sure that if there's any changes or updates, or if there's any new, we know. How do we know if it's a new item? Well, if we click new item, and let's say I want to add a new item, let's just say test and then another test. Okay, and click add item. How do I know if it's an add item? Well, take a look at this. I have a database row associated with all the existing items, but I don't have a database and information associated with this. So we can use this database row. We know that this particular item has not been added to the template items. It would be added here in row 32. So we can use that. So what we want to do is when I want to add or update, I want to loop through all the items here, determine if it's been added already. If it has a database row, then update the details. If not, then add it. So that's just what we're going to do inside our code. This portion is called save the block items. We need to save those to the database so we can load them back in, including their position, their font, everything else needs to be loaded. So the first thing we want to do is determine the last item row. I need to loop through all these items. So the last item row is going to be based on column D. In this case, the last item row is 19. Once we determine the last item row, if it's for some reason less than 9, then go to no items. There shouldn't be. But if there is less than 9, we need to go skip everything. There's nothing we can save if there's no items, if it's less than 9. Assuming that we do have data or items here, in this case 19, we can then loop through them. So 9 item row equals 9 to the last item row. Now we're going to set up our loop. It's going to go all the way. We're going to do all the way until this point here. Next item row. So everything else inside that loop, so everything inside there we're doing for every single item. So the first thing what we want to do is I want to determine, has this item been added? If A is empty, as it is in this case, we know it hasn't been added. If it has been added, then we know the row already. So we need to get that row. For existing items, the row will be here. For new items, we'll just determine the first available item row, in this case 32, just as we did with the templates. So moving on, so the first thing we want to do is determine if it's a new item. If it's empty, if A is empty, then we do need to know, we're going to give it a row. In this case, item database row is going to be equal to sheet 4. That's where items are stored, A99 and XLF plus 1. That's going to be the first available row. Once I have that row, I want to also place it directly in here. Once I have that, we'll put it in A and whatever row we're associated with. So this is going to take care of that. That's going to place that template ID database row directly in there. So template ID, right? I want to know what template is associated with that item. That template ID is going to come from B2, right? So I want to know the template ID here. Going to come directly from B2, right? We know the template ID, but I want to make sure that when we reload it, I know what template this item is associated with. So that template ID is going to go directly here into A. Once we have the template ID, then we have the item row. Inside A is going to take on our template ID. Inside B is going to take our item row. Our item row would be what? Would be this right here, 9, 10, or 11. So either way, we're going to get that row in there, and we know the item ID. So we do that with that line. That is only for new items because we already have it in. So A is going to take on the item database row. If the item ID is 0, then item ID is 1. We need to set the initial item ID. Okay. Actually, we don't need that. I don't think we use that. That was some original idea. We probably don't need that. Item ID, we just set a row, so we don't need that. So again, the sheet 4B is going to take on the item row. Let's take a look at that. Item row had a few changes. Updates, I think it's better. Sometimes we use item IDs, but this way only the row was unique enough. So sheet 4, the B is going to take on the item row. The item row is what, 18, 17, or whatever it is, it's going to take it on there. So that's what it's going to take on. So I know when I load this information back into the designer here, I know exactly what row to place it on. So we're saving that row. So for example, item 20 in row 25, it's item A at row 18. So we go to 25 here, we see that 18. So we know when I load this test information, I know exactly what row to place it in right here. I know to place it in row 18. So we save that information. Once we have that, that's all we need to do. So this information is only for new items. This is for existing. In existing, all I need to do is extract that item row from A. In other words, I need to know what database row from A because it's an existing. So in this case, 25. So because everything else after this point, whether we're updating or we are adding new items, everything else is the same. So only this information for new items or for existing items is here. Everything else after this point is for either both new and existing items. First thing what I want to do in column C is add the item name. I'm going to add that item name here in template item. So the name is going to go here, and the name is going to come directly from here. Item name is going to come from column D. So we do that. Column D in the item row, it's going to put 0. I also want to know the item type. That's going to come from column E. So the item type, I'm going to take whatever's in column E here and place it directly in column D here. So we want to save the item type. I also want to know the value in the database column if there is such. So the value of it is actually the value. If it's a data, that value is going to come directly from here inside C. So that's our next line of code. If E in the item row is a text block, if it's a text block, then E is going to take on the item row text frame, whatever text value is in the shape. right? In this case, right, the text value is this long. In this case, it's just the word test. So I want to know that. The best way to do that, if it's a text block, if the item type is a text block, I want to take whatever is in the shape, whatever text is in the shape, and I want to place that information directly inside here in the value in column E. So how do we get that? If it's a text block, then sheet for E is value is going to be the item shape, item, and the item row. This is the item shape, right? The text. I want to know what text has been added to that specific shape. Text frame dot text range dot text. That is going to be the value that we're going to be placed here. Otherwise, if it's a picture, what if it's a picture? Else if it's a picture, then I want to take whatever the value is. The value is located in C right here. It would, in this case, it would be the, let's take a look here in the non-disclosure because that has a picture. If this case, you'll see that this in C is the actual file path of that picture. That's in column C. I want to take whatever that is, and I want to place it directly inside here in column E, in fact, row 4. So I want to place that value here, even the file path. So if it's a picture, of course, then I want to take whatever is the value in E and place it in C. And the same thing if it's anything else, data value, if it's a data or global variable, I also want to take that. We could use just else. We don't need else if in this case. E in the item row is going to also take on C. So basically the value of it, whatever value has been associated with this, I want to take everything here and place it. The only difference is if it's for some reason a text block, we can then place that in there, although we have it here as well. So that's going to be helpful. So we're taking that information, we're placing it in column C. So that's going to save the information. Now I want to know what columns associated with it. Sometimes data validations like a name or an address have a specific column. What do I mean by column? That's going to be this. Like for example, name, here's our customer file. I want to know what column is associated. Notice name is column 2. We have the type or the email is a column here. So I want to know what columns associated with that because I want to bring that information back into it. And the only way I know is if I know the column associated with this, column 2 or whatever. So we need to bring the column of the data. We have the table, right? I know that the customer list table, that's saved here inside the customers. But once I have the table, I also need to know what columns associated with it. And we can do that here in the customers, pull the column up. So I'm going to save that column here inside here. And I just need to also save that inside our item, and we're going to save that directly in the database column here. So we span that, we see we have a lot of text, so but that's why we shrink it up, so it's going to save it directly inside here. Only the data names, only those with data items actually have their column saved. If it's not, we don't need it. So the column saved is only for the data items. So we do that inside here. Sheet for F, going to take whatever's in B, that's the data column. Next up, the shape name. I want to define the shape name into a variable. So shape name, this is a text, it's going to be basically the item name and the item row. Now what I want to do is I want to set this. I want to check to make sure that it exists. So the best way to do that is to set the item shape. If for some reason this shape doesn't exist, it could create an error. So what I want to do is I want to wrap this in on error resume next, and on error go to 0. That's going to set the shape. Once we do that, we can say if the item shape is nothing, then we go to missing shape. So that means it's going to skip. I can't do anything with the item shape. I can't save the information if it doesn't exist. If for some reason it was deleted or something, we need to skip all this, so it's going to go down to here. But assuming that it's not missing, I want to go over that one more time, but a little bit fast. I want to check to see if a shape exists on the sheet. If it does exist, I want to take all the information from that sheet and I want to fill it all in here. I want to know the left position, the top position, etc. We're going to go over that. But I need to make sure that that shape first exists. So these lines of code help ensure that the shape exists. We're going to set it as a shape, item shape. Remember, this has already been dimensioned as a shape here. Item shape is a shape. So we know that we would then set it based on the shapes and dot shape name. If for some, we've wrapped this in on error, resume next, and on error go to 0. So that if the shape doesn't exist, we're going to run that test. This is our test. Assuming that it is not nothing, means it does exist, then we can continue on. Then with the item shape, we want to take on all the information. I want to load a lot of information. The first thing I want to know is the left position. Now I don't want to know just the left position, right? I want to know the left position based on a specific position. In other words, I want to know how far it is away from column I. I want, like this picture, for example, I want to know exactly how far it is away from column I. So when I place it back, I'm going to place it based on what is in column A. If I move it a little bit and I save it, it's going to change. So I want to know exactly how far it is away from a specific point. That point is going to be column I in any row. So I'm going to do just that. So if I want to save that left position, I'm going to save it in column G. Right, column G is going to take our left position. If we go into template items, we see left position. It's going to be saved in column I. But that position is going to be based how far away from column A. For example, in this logo is displayed 15.75 pixels away from our column I, the left position. If it was right on column I directly, it would be 0, but it's moved a little bit to the right, so it's going to be plus. If it was over to the left here, all the way, it would be a negative number. So keep that in mind. So we have that. So it's going to be equals the dot left, the left position of that shape, the left position, minus the left position of I1. Remember, I can use any row associated with this, but I really want to focus on column I, the left position of column I. So that means if column I's left position was 20 and the left position of the shape was 30, so we'd get 30 minus 20. That way we would get 10 pixels. So we know when we place it back in, we're going to move it 10 pixels to the left shape position relative to column I. That's really important, because if we can't do the left position based on just overall left position, because if you load this up on your computer, your left position is going to be different than my left position. So we need a starting point, an origin point, and we're going to use column I for that. And the same thing for the top. I want to know the top position. In this case, column I is not so important, but we're going to focus on row 5. I want to know the top position relative to row 5. So this time we're going to use 5. So in this case, sheet 4H is where we're going to store our top position, and it's going to be the top position, the current top position of that shape, minus the top position of row 5. Remember, we can use any column here, but 5 is where we're focused on 5. So that way we're going to get the top shape position relative to row 5. Next up, I want to save the height and the width. That's going to save our height and width of our specific shape inside our table here, saving the height in column I and the width in column A. Next up, I want to know the font size. Notice some of our headers have different font size. So I want to extract that font size, and I want to place it directly inside row. So also going to save the table row. That's going to go in column R. And then what I want to do is, if for some reason it's a picture item, right? Picture items, we can't save any font. So I need to run a little test. If the type equals picture, if what's in column E here equals picture, then none of the rest, right? Picture doesn't have a font. Picture doesn't have underline or horizontal or anything like that. So if, for example, in this picture, we're going to skip all the else. Pictures, right, we can't save any of this information for pictures other than the table row. So we've already placed the table row. So basically, if it's a picture, I want to skip all this information. So we do that just here. If sheet 2 E in the value equals picture, right, then skip the text fields. It's going to go down here, skipping the text fields. But assuming that it is not a picture, then we can continue on. So then I want to save in K, I want to save that font size, which is going to be text frame 2, text range characters, dot font, dot size. That's going to save that font size. Same thing, I want to know the font name. That's going to go in column L. I want to know if it's bold or not. So characters dot font dot bold. It's going to give us like a -1 or 0 or something like that. That's fine. Whatever value it assigns is just fine, because when I bring it back in, I'm going to do the same thing, assigning that value. So we can save whether it's bold, it's not true or false, but in this case it's a -1 or 0, the bold here. So I also want to know if it's italicized. 0 would be not. I want to know if it's an underline, and I want to know the horizontal alignment, and I want to know the vertical alignment. So I'm going to save all those into just number variables. So based on that, vertical alignment top 1, 0, 0 or something like that. Either way, whatever the value it is, it's fine. It's just going to save it, and then it's going to reload it. So basically, I want to save all the information for that specific shape, and we do that directly from here. Once we're done with that, we're good. We've saved all the information from the shape. And then also I want to do is I want to make sure sheet 4, I want to wrapping the text. Notice that if I unwrap the text, some of these are going to be really, really long, right? So I want to take this and make sure that we wrap text as false, because I don't want it to be that big. I want it to be really small. Automatically, it would be big if for some reason we didn't wrap the text. So we do that with just a single line of code here. Sheet 4, the entire item database row, plus the column item database row wrap text equals false. That's going to ensure that that row height stays the same. That's it. That's all we have to do. We're going to set template changes to false. We're going to refresh the tabs, run a macro, we'll go over that macro, and the screen updating to true. That's it. That's how we save all the information from a template, but how do we load it in? Right, so everything we do is simply click save it, save and update, and that's the same thing. It's how we save all that information. But how do we load it? When I select on something, I want to load it exactly the way we saved it. So how do we do that? Well, that's on template load, and that's the macro we're going to go over right now called template load. That is the macro that has been assigned. When we make a change here to lease agreement, or I make a change, or I click a tab, it is that which we're going to load. So when we make a change to E3, I want to load that. So we go back into the developer here. Actually, we can go here onto the designer. So when we make a change to E3, we want to load that. That's going to be called on worksheet change. When I make a change to E3, I want something to happen. I also want to make sure C6 value does not equal empty. What does C6 hold? C6 here holds our template ID. We want to make sure that our template ID is based on that. I want to make sure that it's not empty. C6, if we take a look at it, we're going to index the template ID, but I want to match it based on the template name that the user has selected. So when they select a different name, I want to make sure that we actually have a value, a template ID, which is index of the template IDs based on the template name. If there's an error, it'll be blank. So assuming that it's not blank, then I'm ready to do it. All I need to do is take this template ID, place it into B2, and load it up. So that's just what we're going to do. So C6 value, then we're going to run the macro called template load. So now we can load the template. So that is the macro that we are going to focus on right now. Let's go ahead and get into that. So template load, we can close this out and go into template load. So the first thing I want to make sure is C6 is not empty, right? C6 is empty. That means we have an incorrect template ID, something. So if there's an error, it's going to be blank. So assuming that C6 does contain a template ID, we can then load it up. If it's blank, of course, we'll let the user know to please select a correct template. Next up, we're going to set application screen updating to false, and we'll want to clear any existing data. We've done that, just that. And I also want to clear any shapes. Remember, we did that already on our new template macro. We covered all the clear contents, and we also covered how to clear all the shapes. So we went over that. Same thing, we're checking for any items with the name item name, and we're going to delete all those shapes. So once I have everything deleted, we're ready to load the information in. What I want to do is I want to take this template ID and put it inside B2. When I put that in and I change that just like that, it's going to generate a brand new template row based on the template ID. This time we're matching the template ID based on whatever is in B2. So that's going to get us our template row. That template row is very important because we need to load in the information from those templates. I need to load in the template name, the table, and the type, and I'm going to load it in right inside here. So once we have that information, we're ready to load it in. So how do we do that? So B2 is going to take on the template ID. The template row is going to be now located in B3, right? Template row. Once we load it in, we can just load in our fields. Again, we can do this. We're going to take on the template name. That's going to go into G3 from our database. Data table and template type. Pretty simple. Just bring in all the information from our templates here, these three columns here, and bring it into these three particular fields. We're going to load those up. Once we have that, we can move in. Now what I want to do is I want to check to make sure if I select a sheet, if I select a specific cell, I want to make sure that the current sheet, that the active sheet actually is our designer sheet, which of course is sheet 2. So we're going to check on that. If the active sheet code name equals sheet 2, then we can select it. This would create a bug if our active sheet is different. If I try to run the macro, I'm selected on this sheet, but I try to run a macro, and that macro involves selecting a specific cell on this specific sheet, but the sheet is not currently active, it would create a bug. So we want to make sure that the active sheet is. I only want to select a specific cell inside a sheet if the sheet is currently active. So this helps prevent bugs. Next up, we're going to run the macro to load the items. That's going to be in a separate macro, and it's going to take all the items from this. What I want to do is I want to take all the items associated with a specific template, and I want to bring them inside and build up our form again. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing what we want to do is we want to run an advanced filter. I want to know only those items associated with a specific template IDs, for example, only those with one. So how do we do that? Well, we run an advanced filter, and it's going to be based on the template ID. This is based on the B2, right? Remember, we placed our template ID inside B2 right here, although we placed it from here to here. So now we have our template ID located in B2. So we use it to provide a link. So there's already a link, and I also want to make sure that those items have not been deleted. Items that have been deleted won't have a template name. So we're going to use these as our two criteria. The template ID must have a template ID as 1, and the template name must not be blank. If that's the case, then I want to take all of that information and load it up inside our advanced filter results here. So that means every single item within that template is going to be loaded up right here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a loop. I'm going to run a loop from the last row, in this case 13, from 3 to 13. And I'm going to create those brand new shapes based on all this information. Give it during the column, give it the left position, give it the top position, determine the height and width. So that's what we're going to do now. So we can do that with the template load items, and that's right here. This macro is right here. Okay, so how do we do it? The first thing I want is I want to clear existing items just to be sure. We're going to take all the existing from A9 all the way through E and down. We're going to clear all those existing items in case they're there. Once we have that, we can then focus on sheet 4. Sheet 4 is our template items here. So I want to clear any results from X3 all the way to A, and I want to clear any results that might be there previously. So we do that with this X3 through A, and clearing those contents, clear previous results. Next up, again, I want to determine the last item row based on sheet 4. If we're going to run an advanced filter, we need to know the last row. In this case, the last row is 31. So I'm going to run that advanced filter to determine the last row. We have the last row here, last item template row. If for some reason that last item template row is less than 3, go to no items, right? If I don't have any items to load, there's nothing to do. So if it's less than 3, we need to exit out. Assuming that it's not, in this case it's not, it would be 31. We can then run our advanced filter. So that's what we're going to do in the next line of code. A2 must include those headers, A2 through R, all the way through R. We're going to run the advanced filter based on the last item row. Now we're running our advanced filter. We're going to copy that information to another cell, right? I want to create those into another area. I want to copy those and bring them here. I don't want to filter in place. So we're going to use XL filter copy. Criteria range we're going to set as U1 through V2. U1 through V2. That's our criteria as I just went over with you. We're going to copy that information. I want to bring it over to X2 through AN2. X2 all the way through AN2. Bring in those results and putting them right here. So once we have those, we're going to unique equals true. In that case, they're going to be true always. Unique values. So now what I want to do is I want to get the last result row based on column X. In this case, the last result row is 13. So we want to get that information and bring them in. If for some reason the last result row is less than 3, go to no items. So now that we know our last result, so we can run a loop. So the first thing I want to do is I want to bring over all the table information. So A9 through E in the last results row 6 equals X3 through AB. What does that mean? X3 all the way through AB. This information right here, these first 5 columns, again, I want to copy those directly inside our designer sheet right here. So it's going to be this information. These 5 columns here are going to take exactly what we have over from here. So that's the first thing I want to do is just copy them straight away. So that's we can use with one line of code here. So here, right here, A9 through E equals X through AB in the last item row. Remember, we're adding 6. Why do we add 6 onto that? Notice this starts in 3. Notice that this starts in 9. So we need to compensate for that difference. Adding 6 is going to do just that. So we've added 6. So once we have that, we're ready to move on. Now what I want to do is I want to wrap text as false. This is really important because if we look, some of these have a lot of text. For example, this particular header has a lot of text here. So we want to make sure that we've wrapped text false. Otherwise, like for example, this one, there's tons of text in here, right? So if I don't wrap the text, it's going to create the row. It's going to be really, really big. It's going to be like that. I don't really want that. So to do that, we just, again, do wrap text equals false. So for all these rows here, wrap text equals false. That's going to ensure that the row heights are maintained. So we do that here. Sheet 2, A9 through E, last results row 6. That's the entire range. Wrap text equals false. This will make sure that the row heights stay the same. Okay, now we're ready to run our loop. So 3 to the last results row. We're ready to run our loop. It's going to start here on 3 and go to the last row, in this case 13. I want to run all that information. So now I want to bring in all the information and create the shape. So what I'm going to do here is I've got a sample shape right here inside our designer. I'm going to take this sample shape. Notice, take a look at the shape. It's called sample shape. What I want to do is take this shape. I want to duplicate it, and then I want to make changes based on that, and I want to add the text, put the position, take the left size, and I want to turn it into the individual shapes here. So just like that. So we're going to do a bunch of things. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to determine the item row. That's going to be AC in the item. That is the item row, like 9, 10, or 11. It's located here in AC. AC is our item row. This is the same rows that we have directly in our designer here, 9 through 19. So keep that in mind. So we want to make sure that we have those rows. So I'm going to put that into a variable called item row. Once we have that, I wanted to say the shape name. The name of the shape, remember, they're unique. They're the word item and the item row. This is going to set our shape name. So now what I want to do, if it's a picture, it's going to be a little bit different. If sheet 4, AB in the template row equals picture, we've already placed it. So basically what I want to do is I want to say if AB is a picture, then we need to do something. We need to create that picture, otherwise do something different. So if it's a picture, we are going to do a few things. We're going to determine the picture path is going to be located in sheet 4Z. That picture path is going to be located here. Here's our picture path, right? So we want to know that in order to load the picture. So the picture path determined into a variable, string variable, and we need to check to ensure that the picture path is accurate. So if the directory of the picture path, VB directory, does not equal empty, that means it's the correct path, we can then create it. So the sheet 2 pictures insert, I want to insert a picture name and then give it a name of the shape name. So this line will do two things. It's going to insert a picture inside sheet 2 and it's going to give it a name of shape. That's it. That's all we have to do if it's a picture. Else it's not a picture. So for everything else we can do the following. Sheet 2 sample shape. Remember I showed you that, just that sample shape. That's shape right here. This is called sample shape and it's off the screen or off the main columns here, so when we hide these it's going to be hidden. So I want to take this shape and I want to duplicate it and then I want to assign it a name. So we can do that right here. Duplicate, give it a name as a shape name. So this particular line of code does just that. It duplicates that shape and it assigns it a name. So now we can focus on what we're changing, everything else with that specific shape. So with sheet 2 item shape name, that's the brand new shape that we just created. We're going to do a lot of things. First I want to assign a macro called onAction, and the macro is called item select. Remember that allows us to assign a macro that we went over, so we can, when we click on it, something happens. So the first thing we're going to do is assign that macro. Next up I want to get that left position. Now we know the left position is relative. That left position is going to be located in AD. So again, that's not the left position, it's the left position. So it's going to be whatever is wherever column I is located here plus whatever the left position is. That's going to give it that exact left position. So the left position of this shape is equal to sheet 2 I, the left position of column I, plus whatever is located in AD. And the same thing with the top position. Now we're bringing it back. The top position is based on the row 5, the top position of row 5 plus whatever the difference is that we saved in column AE. Now it's located. So our top position is going to be right here. It's going to be plus, of course, this is this plus wherever row 5 is going to give us the top position of that shape. The left position, of course, is the left position of column I plus whatever is in here. Next up, I want to put in the height and width of that shape, and we can do that with this here. Of course, the AF would be the height of that shape is going to be whatever's stored in AF. The width of that shape is going to be stored in whatever's in AG. Next up, if it's a picture, everything else we only create for text types. If it's a picture, we can skip all of that and go here. So if AB in the template item row equals picture, then go to skip the text field. It's going to skip everything else and go down here because I don't want to do any of this for picture items. For non-pictures, we can't. Okay, so once we've done it, then I want to assign the text. AB and the text value is going to, if sheet 4 AB and the text equals, if it's a text block, then what I want to do is I want it for text blocks, I want to assign whatever is located in Z. So I want to take whatever's in here and I want to put that into the text. So in other words, the address or whatever here, I want to put that in this case actually text block. So signature, this is a text block. So that text, the value, that means the text inside that shape will take on whatever's text here. So for example, this text, non-disclosure agreements can take on whatever is located in here, like this one. For example, this one, Z is, so notice this large text frame, that's going to take on the text of that shape. So we do that with this line of code here. If it's a text block, then the dot shape, the shape's dot text, text frame, text range, text equals whatever's in G. So basically we're just putting the text, whatever's in this column, putting in the text of the shape. If it's a data item, then what I want to do is I want to assign it a global variable, or it's a global. If it's a data item or global variable, then what I want to do is I want to assign it a formula. That formula, if it's a formula, then I want to give it a specific location, right? So what if it's a formula, like looks at this particular one, let's go on, select on something that contains a formula. If it's a global variable such as this, I want to give it a formula, and I want to give it based on the row. So basically all of our data is going to be here, whether it's global data or whether it's a customer data. I want it stored here. So I want to give it a link. I want to link it to whatever data, that row that's associated in here. So notice our data is located here. So in this case, I want to give it a link. So for example, this one's going to be K18. This one, let's move this to the back and show this here. This one, of course, is K11. So I want to assign it a specific column, and I want to give it a link. So for anything that's associated with the data, because this data will change, so we want to make sure it's dynamic. So as this data change, as we change for a different customer, notice that this changes. So as soon as all I need to do is put in a customer row here, and it changes so easily. So if I sign it a link, we can do just that. Wow, this is going to be long training. I'm not doing a part 3, so I'm going to squeeze everything in this training, certainly. Okay, so let's do that. So let's go ahead and add this in. I want to make sure that we have the link in. So how do we do that? Well, we do this. If it's a global variable or it's a data item, then we're going to set the drawing objects formula equals K and the item row. That's going to give it that formula. That way when the data changes, so does that. Next up, again, we're going to take care of the font size. I want the font size of the shape. It's going to take on whatever's in AH. The font name is going to come from AI. And then the bold, italics, and underline. Everything for that specific shape, we're just going to take on whatever. So then all we're doing again is just taking the bold, italic, whatever values we've saved, we're going to take that information and just basically assign it a shape. That way, if we've created something bold, it's going to automatically save information, the font size or anything else with that. It's going to save associated with that. Next up, I want to give it the vertical anchor, just the vertical anchor. So that's the vertical anchor is this. What does that mean? Like if I have a vertical, right? Notice that this is the top, but if I put it at the bottom here, that's the vertical anchor here. So that way I'll also want to save the vertical anchor too. So that's the top or the bottom. So sometimes we use that. Okay, so I want to save that too in cell. All right, so everything else loaded in based on whatever we've saved inside the database. That's how we do it. So that's exactly how we actually load the items in there. That's it. So once we load it, on there go to 0. We're going to next the template row, so we keep looping through all of the rows until we have everything loaded inside our template. Very cool, huh? All right, great. I'm glad I got to show that part to you. We've got a little bit more to show you because there's so much really great things in this. So let's take a look at that. We've shown you how to add those. We've shown you, let's delete. Now, last week I challenged you to see how you could delete it if you were going to do that, and now I've done it just that. So basically with delete, if I want to delete a template, we want to give it a question saying yes or no. In this case, no. But what if I want to delete it? I want to make sure that we not only delete this, but I want to delete clear out all the associated rows here. So how do we do that? Well, let's go through that macro. So the first thing is, are you sure you want to delete this template? Yes or no. And if they say no, we're going to exit the sub. We want to make sure that B3 contains a value, right? If there's no template row is located here in B3. If there's no row, we can't delete it. Make sure that we can actually clear the information out on the specific row. So once we do that, once we determine that we do have that, we can sheet 3 template row and the template row, entire row delete. That's just going to delete whatever row here we have associated here. Next up, what I want to do is I want to focus on the items. So the template items here. Notice again, we're going to run another advanced filter based on this information here. Determine the row. We have the row. We know the row. How's the row of the original data? Because that's saved right here in template row in X. So we have that. Now we know it, so we can run our advanced filters. So the first thing we're going to do is clear out any results from X. We're going to run the advanced filter just as we did the last time. I'll get the last row, run our advanced filter, get our results. So all of our results are going to come in here just like they are here. And now what I want to do is I want to run a for next loop. So I have the original row of the table. So if I run a loop from 3 to the last row, here we determine the template item row located in X. In this case, it's 31. Then what I'm going to do is clear the contents of the row all the way from A through R. I don't want to delete. Deleting could create issues, so clearing contents works better. So it's going to clear it out all the way from C all the way to Q. So that's just what we have here. Actually, A through R, we can do that, clearing the contents out, not C through Q. Okay, so that's it. So we're going to clear the contents out. So as long as we're clearing everything out, then what I want to do is I want to refresh the tabs. That's the macro that I'm going to go over with you now. And then we're going to add a new template. So that's how we delete the template and refresh the tabs. Now, before we leave you, I want to get really to show you how this really cool tabs feature right here. In this training, print documents, we're going to probably not go over that. This is not primary, but this you can focus on. You can take a look at these because we've gone over something like that before. So these particular macros here located in the print send, I'm going to let you go over these print documents and email. Our training is not focused on that, but you can take a look at these macros yourself when you download it. Relatively straightforward. Other trainings have focused on these, so we're not going to focus on those. Not too important for this particular training because I really want to focus on creating these documents, and these trainings are already long. So I'll let you go over these macros as far as the print and send macros, but something that we've been over many times before in other trainings. You're welcome to download it and view the code. But I want to get into this tabs macro. How do we create these really cool dynamic tabs? If I delete a specific template, let's take a look at this. If I delete it, I want that template gone. So let's click delete, and it's going to refresh and automatically clear those tabs. All right, if I create a new template, let's say test template, and then we just give it a data table as a customers, and then template type, it's just test anything, and we click save or update. We want to make sure to have that brand new tab showing up, and the best way to do that is to create some really cool tabs. So I've created two different tabs as samples, and basically what I've done to get this effect is just a simple shape. So let's take a look at the shape that's been created here. This is, if you want to create this shape, it's called the double rounded side. So it is going to be this one right here. It's called two-sided round. So it's this one right here. That's the shape that I'm focusing on. Round, same side corner. That's the shape that I want. And if we zoom in, we take a look at what shape. Now what I don't want is any borders around this. I really don't want any borders because I want it to blend into the bottom. So the best way to get this effect here, let's go ahead and click on this. The best way to get effects is to add a shadow. If we zoom in, we see it's got a shadow. So I'm going to go into that format and take a look at that shape here inside that. Actually, we'll right click and go into the format the shape. We can take a look at some of the shadow properties here on this. I've given it a shadow property, the blur of 1, angle, and I've given it a little bit of the size of just a slightly bigger size. Notice it's 101%. That's going to give us that nice effect, and 1 point, so a distance. So that slight shadow actually provides us as a border when I don't want a border. The reason I don't want a border is because I want it to blend in. Notice I want it to blend in. I only want, so that's a great way. No border on this shape, but add a shadow. So I've created two different shapes. This one has a specific fade of light blue to white. This one has a shape of gray to white. So I've created two different shapes. And to do that, here you can see, if we look all the way here, we see a sample. We see sample inactive, and we see sample active. So I've created two of those shapes, and we can use those shapes to recreate the tabs. Take a look at that. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing what I want to do is I want to determine how many templates. I want to create a tab for each of those templates. So we need to determine that. And let's go into the tabs and take a look at this. So tabs macros, tabs refresh. I'm going to determine the tab shape as a shape. The last template row is long because I need to loop through all the templates. And what I want to do is the template row we're looping through, and the template ID is long. And I want a left position is double, right? I want to make sure to keep incrementing the left position so that they don't overlap. So I need to create the left position as double. We're going to start it out based on the first position is the first template. So we can do that. So the first thing I want to do is determine the last template row based on sheet 3, right? Getting that last row is important. In this case, it's 6, so we can loop through all the templates. All right, so once we have that, what I want to do is I want to, again, delete any tabs that are associated with it. If we're refreshing, I want to delete all those tabs. If we take a look at this, this says template tab 1, this says template tab 2, tab 3, and so on. So I want to delete any template tabs and recreate them when we refresh them. The best way to do that is determine which of those shapes contain the words temp tab. So we do that with this. For each shape in shapes, again, just like we did, if it contains template tab is greater than 0 or does not equal 0 is fine, then delete. So we're going to delete all the shapes on the sheet that contain the words template tab. Next up, if the template row is less than 3, exit the sub. I want to make sure that we actually have templates. I'm going to start out the left position is 1. That's just going to give it a little bit of a left. Basically, I don't want it exactly on this border. I want to move it a little bit to the right of I, at least for our first one. So we're going to start it off. So for the template row equals 3 to the left. So this is going to loop through all of our templates. We know our template ID is located in A and column. So I want to make sure we have our A. I want to make sure our templates IDs are here because it is the name of the tab. So the template tab 1, template tab 2, and so on. So I want to get that into a variable, our template ID, which is located in column I. Once we have that, we can then determine if I want to see which one's the active. How do I know which one? For example, this one template 2 and this one template 1. How do I know which one's active? Our active template ID is located in B1. So our active one should be white. Our inactive one should be gray. So we can determine B2 is going to hold our active one. So if B2 equals the template ID, then it's our active shape, right? This is our active. Let's put in the word active template, and then I'm going to put in else inactive templates. Inactive templates. Okay. So if it's active, what do I want to do? I want to take this shape, our sample active, and I want to duplicate that. That's what we're going to do here. Shapes, sample active, duplicate, and give it a name of template tab. Give it a specific name, template tab, and the template ID. Else it's going to active. Otherwise, we're going to duplicate the inactive one, template tab, giving it the same name but just duplicating the different shape. So this is going to duplicate, create all of our shapes. Now what we want to do is I want to focus on the size and the position. Okay, so what about the size? The text frame auto size, I want to give it the auto size, so we automatically size it. I want to give it a specific height of 20 and a width of 90. Okay, we probably don't need the auto size here. Actually, we probably could get rid of that. I was thinking about something about auto sizing it, the width, but I think it's better to have standard widths. But you can do a variable width on that, but as long as you set the height as specific. So the left position is going to be sheet 2 I5. Remember, that's our starting position, I5, or column I. So we've already set the left position here as 1. So for our first tab, it's going to be I5 plus 1. That's going to move it slightly over. If we zoom into this, we see that it's not exactly on column I5. It's moved 1 pixel over to the right, and that's just what I want. 1 pixel over to the right. So we've got that. So now the top position is going to be able to row 4 minus 5. So we're going to set it about row 4 minus 5, which is going to move it up. Minus means up. I want to move it a little bit above 4, so we can do that. So that's going to set the same top position for every single one. Next up, I want to assign a formula to it, right? Because I want to know the name of this. Where is this? If we take a look at this, if I click on, let's click on a specific tab, notice it says templates B3, right? That's the name. So I've given it a name based on whatever's in based on here, the template name B3, B4, B5. So notice each one has a different formula, and that's going to be based on the name where the templates are located. So I've given it the formula equals the templates, column B, and the template row. This gives it a dynamic formula so that we can link directly to the name. We could also basically assign it the name, but we've given a formula. That way, if the name changes, it automatically updates. That way, if we change the template name, it's going to update. Okay, I also want to give it that bold font. Notice the bold font. So how do we do that? Well, inside that, we can do if the sheet 2 equals template ID means if it's active, B2 is our template ID. If it equals the template ID, then what I want to do is I want to bold it. Text frame 2, text range, character font, bold. That's going to bold it out. Then what I want to do is on action, I want to assign a macro to it, right? Because each one has a macro. That macro is going to allow us to load a specific one. So how do we do that? Well, that's going to simply take it. Notice how these tabs, the vertical width is now higher, okay? So it's really cool. All right, so how do we do that? We want to make sure we assign a macro because it's this macro that's going to allow us to load a tab. So we can use on action, and I create a macro called tab select. I'm going to go over that macro with you next. The left position, of course, now I want to increment the left position, right? So once I've created it, when I create the next one, I need to make sure that next one is moved over to the right. So how do we do that? Well, we just simply left position equals the left position plus the width of the shape, right? The width of whatever this one is, I want to add it to that. So we can do that. If we wanted a little bit of separation, let's say we wanted a little bit of separation, just add 1 or 2, and that's going to give us a little bit of separation if they were too close together. So now let's see when we update the template, save or update, it's going to automatically, so notice they moved over a little bit. Let's try a little bit more. Let's see what it looks like with a 3. That's going to give us a lot of separation. Updating, it's going to refresh those tabs. So save or update, it's going to refresh those tabs. So now you see there's a little bit of separation. You can do that too. Maybe they're a little bit close together, but it gives you a nice effect. Let's go back with 1. I kind of like that. Okay, so you can also give it a little bit of effect. So you see how it automatically runs based on that. So what we want to do is add the macro to that. So it's going to add a macro and then increment the left position. Then I want to know if the left position, right? I can't keep creating left positions all the way over here. So I want to make sure if the left position is greater than whatever J is, then stop. Because now there are ways to loop through these. It would be nice to loop through these, adding arrows. That's something I could do in the future, but we're kind of limited on time here. If the left position plus the left position of I4 is greater than J4, right? If it's greater, if it's increased, then what I want to do is exit 4. I want to stop the loop. Basically, I don't want to create tabs forever because they would go off it. So that's going to exit it. So it's going to allow us at least a good, let's say 5 or 6 tabs here. And that's sufficient for a while, but we can add future macros in to loop through that, which would be kind of nice. Okay, that's it. So then we're going to close the loop. So that's how we create this tab feature. But how do we actually create a macro that runs it? Well, that's actually really simple. Notice that everything says template tab 3 or template tab 4. Notice we have the template ID inside the name here. So now all I need to do is take that ID and extract it out. That's just what we do inside the macro. Look at that, just 1 or 2 lines of code. Sheet 2 E3. E3, what is E3? E3, of course, is going to take on our template name. So what I want to do is I want to determine the template name here, E3. I want to take that template name, whatever's located here, and I want to place it directly in here because we know that as soon as we change the name in E3, it's going to load that appropriate template. So E3 is going to be sheet 3B and replace the application caller template tab. So what I'm doing here, I'm going to extract the template tab out of here. So if we have non-disclosure agreement, if this particular shape is called template tab 1, I want to remove the words template tab and I only want to have 1 remaining. Then what I want to do is I want to take that 1 and I want to determine where it is. If we add 2 to that 1, we're going to get 3. That's going to give us our row number. If I know that our row number is 3 and I know B are template names, then all I have to do is take B3 and place it directly inside E3, and that's going to automatically load it. So that's just what I did here. So we're going to remove the word template ID. We get this here, right here, this replace. This is going to get the 1, right? This will get us that 1, or for example, if we click template, because we're removing the words template tab, and all we're left with is the 1. If we take that 1 and we add it to 2, it's going to get us 3. So this right here is 3, right here. This is 3. So B plus 3, the value of that is going to be the name. So we're going to take basically the name of the templates here and place it directly inside. As soon as we place it here, it's going to automatically run that. So all we have to do is simply just click on a specific template. It's going to change the name back inside here, and that's going to load up the template. Then all I want to do is just click tabs refresh in case why do I want to run tabs refresh one more time? Because our active tab has changed. Notice that our active tab changed. The reason it's changed is because we have a brand new there. So that means our new template ID is here, and that way we want to update which is the active tab, and I want to update the inactive tabs automatically here. Very cool, huh? Just a few lines of code. Then all we're going to do is run the macro to load the template. Actually, we don't even need the template load. Don't need that because on any change, right, on any change of E3, we automatically load. So we don't need that. That would be double. So that's all we need, actually. Just that. All we need is a single click there. It's going to automatically load it. No reason to load it twice because changing E3 automatically loads it. Very cool. All right, great. I'm really glad I got to show you that. Thanks so much. It's been an incredible 2-part training. Thank you so much. It's been a fantastic week. And please don't forget to share it. If you do like these trainings, I appreciate if you can pick up our 175 workbook zip file for just $66. That's a current promotion, but I don't know how long I'm going to keep that there for you. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.